In 2015, a group of rare manuscripts from medieval monasteries went on exhibit in New York at a gallery, and the crown jewel of the collection, originally from an abbey in Lisbon, Germany, was a massive handmade book, handwritten, of all four Gospels, and this was created presumably for the ceremonial purposes of swearing of oaths. With its cover, which was made from thick oak, the book was beautiful. It dates back to the year 980, and the book is listed, if any of you are interested in purchasing it, for a mere $6.5 million. This book is speculated to have been made by an abbess to offer to her convent of nuns centuries ago, or to a wealthy woman who had just taken her vows. Its cover was designed intricately with copper clasps on that carved oak. The volume's most unusual attribute was a curious circular diagram on a normally blank protective sheet before the title page. And its concentric bands on this sheet were filled with spidery writing in deep brown and bright red. At the center was the word Deus, God. This prayer wheel was what was on the insert in the book, and it was rediscovered in 2015. And several theologians and historians took note of it and realized that it had the possibility of reinvigorating the prayer and meditative life of contemporary believers. So while it's based on an ancient tradition, it is structured in a way with fresh opportunity for us. Since 2015, the prayer wheel has caught on, and it is now a way to guide the faith and prayer expressions of all of us. It's compared to Indiana Jones' search for the Middle Earth, and that's supposed to be funny. Okay, it was also compared to the board game Parcheesi. There is in your bulletin a copy of the English translation of this prayer wheel. It has 4 concentric bands with the key words on the outer band of the Lord's Prayer. On the next band, the gifts of the Spirit. In the next band, the events in Jesus' life. And then the inside-most band, the Beatitudes. If this is too small for you, like it was for me, because we're over a certain age, you can Google the prayer wheel or the Lisbon, Germany prayer wheel. This provides the 7 contemplative paths to God, who is in the center of the wheel. So for the next several weeks, we're going to look in depth at one of the sections of the prayer wheel. Now, mind you, we're not talking about the Lord's Prayer per se, because each section of the prayer wheel slices through those bands. So it includes the Beatitudes, the events of Jesus' life, the gifts of the Spirit, and the Lord's Prayer. I'm inviting you to take your bulletin home, and we have a diagram of who is sitting where, so we'll know who didn't take their bulletins home. Kidding. And I'm inviting you to use the prayer wheel all week for quiet meditation. I'll talk more about that in a moment. So to start with, I'm going to ask you to do something uncomfortable, and I'm going to ask you to turn to a person beside or in front or back of you and quickly share a memory you have of the Lord's Prayer. It could be your favorite part of the Lord's Prayer or something that you struggle with in the Lord's Prayer, but very quickly, like 20 seconds each, turn and talk to each other about your thoughts on the Lord's Prayer. Go. Thank you all so much for doing it. We had an office poll in the church office about whether or not you would actually look at me with darts out of your eyes or whether you would turn to each other and pretend to discuss it. So thank you. You helped me a great deal. Who won? It looked like you did a good job of pretending to actually talk about the Lord's Prayer, so thank you. In the earliest days of Christianity, the Lord's Prayer was considered such a treasure that people had to go through, get this, 3 years of training and preparation before they could be entrusted with its sacred words. Imagine that. And now, I don't know about you, but I think we're all probably guilty of mindlessly mouthing it or reading it without too much thought, at least on occasion. In our well-meaning and sincere efforts to memorize the words, or more often to use the right words at the right church, and you know what I mean about that. Is it debts or trespasses or wrongs or sins or, oh my. And then we also work really hard to stay in sync with each other. My concern is that we may have lost the wild power of this prayer. In fact, the seemingly perfunctory phrases are actually very much alive with the miracle of our faith. If we allow it, I would suggest the Lord's Prayer can actually open us up to the holy. Richard Foster, who you may remember taught at Friends University, wrote this quote, "Real prayer comes not from gritting our teeth, but from falling in love." Prayer is that time when we allow ourselves to fall in love with what is holy. So today I want to focus on the phrase, "Hallowed be your name," and that whole pie of the prayer wheel that is in your bulletin. The root word for hallowed is hal, which is also the root word for English words like whole and health. To be holy, Holy, is to find wholeness and health. So holiness is not actually a statement about morality or ethics or perfection, but rather holy means to have health and wholeness. This is very important. Each of you has holiness within you, whether or not you consider yourself perfect. When we say, "Hallowed is your name," we're beginning a prayer where God, the Holy, invites us into communion and into this hallowed state of being. So this prayer is an invitation to wake up from our spiritual complacency and to meet God in wholeness. It opens the holiness we can find anywhere and everywhere, including within us, in worship here together or in solitary contemplation. If we serve at the Lord's Diner or in the university classroom, in the stranger down the street or the neighbor next door. This is what our traditional word for today teaches us, that we are related to God and we are to be glorified with God. In fact, my seminary history professor taught us that word Abba in the Bible, which is commonly translated as daddy, could be thought about in terms of the one you might call in the night when you have awakened from a bad dream. So let me ask you, who is the one you yearn for when you are most afraid? What is the name you would call out when you are half awake and you need comfort? That is the name, that is the one we can associate in the deepest prayers of our hearts and in the Lord's Prayer. And that name is holy. So have you identified the name of the one you would call out? That one is holy to you. That provides wholeness to you. So here's our traditional text from Romans 8. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. When we cry, Abba, Father, or Mama, or Honey, or Grandma, or Sweetheart, it is that very Spirit bearing witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. In fact, if we suffer with him, we can also be glorified with him. So when we begin the Lord's Prayer, we begin with the acknowledgement that God is holy and hallowed. But we say much more than that, actually. We're saying that all which bears God's imprint, including us and all living things, God has made whole and healthy. You didn't know that, I'll bet. I didn't remember it, actually, until I reread this book. When we pray, holy is your name, we're recognizing the divine within us and outside of us, of everything that is whole and healthy. Take time to explore that in your quiet time. What would it look like for you to be even more whole and healthy? In a time when we are shifting from communicating in sentences and paragraphs to simple tweets and memes, this prayer wheel comes at a great time because it gives us a short word or phrase to use as a thought. So if you will, follow along in your prayer wheel on your bulletin with your finger from the outside to the inside and take 1 or 2 minutes. This is during the week, okay, not now. Take 1 or 2 minutes to meditate on the phrase, holy is your name. And then maybe that's today or tomorrow. And then the next day, go in a section and meditate on wisdom. And then the next day, move into the wheel and meditate on incarnation. And the following day, you can meditate on peacemakers. And then on the last day, go across the wheel to children of God. You see that the shading goes across the God into the next beatitude. Finally, on the following 2 days, which will bring you back to church next Sunday, take a minute to consider how each of these words are connected and how they lead you to God. You may find it helpful to literally take your finger and trace along the path while you're meditating and note the images and maybe journal what questions or associations or insights each phrase evokes in your mind. If you live with people, you could even do this as a group. And I'm inviting you to take your bulletin, cut out the prayer wheel if you want, and put it where you can see it regularly, on your kitchen table or your bedstand. But make the prayer, which is easily Googleable, as your screensaver. I will say, as hard as it is to say that, my spelling check hated that word. And even after I said it was okay, Googleable, it still didn't like it and kicked it out and made it all kinds of other things. But the prayer wheel, if you can't read it or you want a bigger sign of it, you can print it out on your printer and attach it maybe to the dashboard of your car. But live with this the next several weeks, if you will, and let those words saturate your mind and your heart. Thomas Kelly said, prayer is to be invaded to the depths of one's being by God's presence. I hope that that is your experience during these weeks as we study and use the prayer wheel to enrich our lives. I will also note that if you want to buy the book, there are prayers for each day of the 7 weeks that go through. So you can, instead of coming up with your own meditations or prayers, you can cheat and have the prayers in the book for yourself. I used one of those prayers for this week on wisdom as our pastoral prayer this morning, by the way. So I hope that you will allow this to envelop you. Whether or not you're a Christian, whether or not you like the Lord's Prayer, take time to meditate and consider the powerful words of the Lord's Prayer, the gifts of the Spirit, the events in Jesus' life, and the Beatitudes, and how they connect with each other. Amen.